Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Please can I welcome everyone to this meeting of Cabinet Committee Housing on Monday the 5th of February from the Walton Suite, Winchester Guildhall. The time is 10 o'clock. My name is Councillor Chris Westwood, Chairperson of the Committee and Cabinet Member for Housing. The meeting is live streamed from the Council's YouTube channel and the recording will also be available after the meeting. Subtitles will be switched on and advice on how to turn these on is set out on our website. Can everyone ensure mobile phones are on silent, and can I remind members to use their microphones? In the unlikely event that it's necessary to evacuate the building, the fire alarm will sound. Please follow all the instructions given to you by our team. Can I welcome members of the public to the meeting this morning, and we will invite you forward when it's time for you to make your contribution. So turning to the agenda, there's one agenda change that I would like to make. I've discussed it with the people concerned. They're happy to do this, and I would like to move the agenda item 11, discussing the homeless prevention grant allocation to Trinity, to be the first paper to be discussed at item 7, and then we will revert to the normal order beyond that. So I'll ask for that paper to come up at that point. Do we have any apologies for absence? I don't believe we do.
Yes, we have apologies from Monica Gill from TACT, Chair, for whom Julian Perkins is deputising.
Okay, thank you. Do I have any disclosures of interest? Councillor Becker.
Thank you. We own a property that is connected to one of the council-owned sewerage works, so I have personal pecuniary interest in the item, or I've lost track of the numbering now, the HRA account budget, so I will step out for that item.
It's item number 8. Thank you. Councillor Hall.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to declare a personal but non-pecuniary interest in what was item 11 regarding Trinity, because my husband is a board member at Trinity. Thank you.
Thank you. And I understand you'll be staying for that, which I'm happy with. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. That's appreciated.
I have requests from councillors to speak. So Councillor Lee, you wish to speak on the new homes programme, which is item 7 on the agenda, and I'll call you forwards at that point to speak at that item. I also have requests for public participation from Mr. Tate to speak on the agenda, on the paper agenda, items 9, 10 and 11. Mr. Tate, I will call you forwards as we discussed for each of those items when they are debated. And Mrs. McKenna, you wish also to speak on item number 11, the paper for Trinity, and I'll ask you to come forward and speak on that paper at that time. Next item, minutes of the previous meeting held on the 14th of November 2023. Can I ask if those minutes are agreed?
Agreed.
Agreed. Thank you. Item 6, Chair announcements. I don't have any specific announcements to make today. And we'll move swiftly on to item number 11, which is which I'm bringing forwards, which is the homeless prevention grant allocation for Trinity. And in your pack, it's pages 109 to 126. I will do a brief introduction and then I'll call forward the public speakers at that point. The council is committed to preventing and relieving homelessness, ensuring that everyone in the district receives housing advice and appropriate support if they are homeless or at risk of homelessness. It is recognised that the council cannot prevent homelessness alone and works in close partnership with statutory, voluntary and charitable organisations to achieve its outcomes. The Department for Levelling Up, Housing and Communities allocates the council an annual homeless prevention grant, and this grant enables local authorities to further control the flexibility of managing homelessness pressures. Trinity, a partner organisation of the council, has applied to the council to request a grant of £60,000 from the Homeless Prevention Grant to fund the following roles. Firstly, the Trinity Housing Manager. The housing manager role involves supporting people to remain in accommodation, maintain good rent accounts, and taking a strategic view of Trinity's future development as a housing provider. Secondly, a Move On development coach. This role will work with the 20 residents of Trinity's accommodation, together with approximately 50 users at its centre, and women's services who are in private rented accommodation or housing association properties. Trinity continues to be a key partner in our drive to help people who are homeless in this district, often through circumstances beyond their control, and I believe this request is something that we can all support. The amount being requested represents good value for money against the proposed outcomes to be achieved. If approved, the council will make the payment in one sum in this financial year 2023-24. In a moment, I'll ask Mrs. Thorburn if there's anything you would like to add in terms of the detail for this request. But before that, Mr. Tate, I believe you wanted to speak. If you'd like to come forwards, and you'll have your 3 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, for the opportunity to address the committee. I attended the Trinity AGM recently, and it was mentioned at that meeting that their statistics show that there are 9 homeless people in Winchester. So whilst I don't want to come over as being overly negative towards this grant, I am perplexed by what we're trying to achieve. We have the Beacon, which was set up in a similar time as Trinity, and it was always my understanding the Beacon would provide housing and Trinity would supply support. But that has changed over the years, so there is a duplication of service. And just I've made mention here and at other meetings, I'm slightly perplexed. 88 Sussex Street, which I've raised on countless occasions, which is a council-owned property split into 2 flats. The bottom flat has remained empty for approaching 2 years. It's council-owned, Bournemouth Churches run it. The council's selling Eastgate Street, which was used as temporary accommodation. It's refurbishing 59 Colebrook Street, which is a 6-bed HMO. Trinity are looking, they've got just under £3 million in the bank because they're looking to buy further property. So what is the 9 homeless persons figure? I have quite a lot of engagement with people who are trying to sustain their tenancies or have chaotic lives or are homeless. And what is so in need is ongoing support. The issue isn't giving them a house, it's giving them the support to allow them to stay in that house. And there's an element of frustration that I have, that as I walk through Winchester and see people begging on the street, virtually all of them are housed, and it's the support that is required. So whilst I don't want to sort of stand here as a member of the public and argue against supporting this grant, I do think that there needs to be some clarity as to what Trinity and the Beacon are actually doing. And great for the fundraising efforts that Trinity have gone through, but they do have, as the accounts indicate, just a fraction under £3 million in cash. A lot of that is unrestricted money. So are they a housing provider or are they a support organisation? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Tate. Mrs. McKenna, if you'd like to step forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Ian. Thank you for the opportunity to speak at this morning's council meeting. We're very, very pleased to be recommended for a grant from the Homelessness Prevention Fund, especially as this has been our long-term focus and continues to remain so. Trinity is committed to working with Winchester City Council as a key partner, as we have done for many, many years now, along with other partner agencies in the city, including the Beacon, as Ian mentioned, and many others. We truly believe that by working together with some of the most complex and long-term homeless individuals in the Winchester region, we will eradicate the need to rough sleep in line with the government's target for 2025. Ian mentioned the figure of 9. We did mention that figure at our AGM, and that was the current rough sleepers on the spot count. It doesn't reflect homelessness in Winchester. That was people found on one night sleeping out rough. Obviously, we know that homelessness also includes sofa surfers and many, many others who come into Trinity. This grant will go further than that. It will allow us to give the extra support whilst people are housed in our therapy-based accommodation. They'll be able to address past traumas and start to realise that living well, start to realise what living well really means. The aim is to stop the cycle of repeat rough sleeping, and that means to close the revolving door, which over the course of many, many years we have seen in the past. And I believe we're getting there. We also recognise there is a need to support vulnerable people, as has been mentioned, who are housed to keep their tenancies, particularly victims of domestic abuse and private renters. This funding will provide the Move On development coach the opportunity to spend one-to-one time with this group, and through early interventions, sometimes the simple things like opening bills, having access to IT, avoiding debt by not taking out payday loans can make all the difference to someone staying in their home. The root causes of anxiety and trauma will be addressed. These are usually caused by past eviction or homelessness. Ultimately, we want to prevent homelessness, and that's why I'm here today. Once we've done that, we want people to live well and enjoy a normal life in their community. With changes afloat in the Winchester area, we do plan to create 8 more homes this year and a possible 12 within the next 5 years. This will be quality, one-bed supported housing to help prevent rough sleeping and provide more move-on opportunities. So that's all from me.
Thank you, Mrs. McKenna. Right, thank you both for your questions. Turn to Mr. Tate first. I think your figure of 9 homeless in Winchester has just been answered by Mrs. McKenna, to be honest, and I was out actually that night doing the rough count asleep at 1 in the morning, and so I'm aware of the numbers. I'm aware of the people that were out there that night, and I don't believe there are 9 homeless on the streets in Winchester. There were 9 rough counters, rough sleepers that night, only 2 of which I think were unknown to us. Others had accommodation. In terms of the properties and 88 Sussex Street, etc., we are in the process of doing a temporary accommodation strategy review. We are lucky in Winchester because of the support we have with our partners and because the fantastic work that our homeless team do within this council, that we have very few people in temporary accommodation at this moment in time. If we look at district authorities either side of us and nearby and in the south of England, we'll find other authorities who are spending up to and beyond £500,000 on temporary accommodation at the moment. We have a comprehensive review of our properties and our accommodation, and a review of the pathways that we wish to take people through to move them from homelessness through to being able to live independently. And that paper will be coming through our Business and Housing Policy Committee in the next couple of months, and it will also be find its way back to this committee moving forwards, and that will give us a complete view of the accommodation of properties and pathways and numbers we expect to encounter over the next 2 to 3 years. And that's where that will be reviewed. Thirdly, you talked about Trinity and Beacon. My view of this is that they do complementary but different jobs. Trinity handles the most complex cases that we have in this city and handles them very well. And the facilities that they have in terms of accommodation and the facilities they have in terms of the support staff for which they're asking for additional funds today, all combine to manage what is a very serious problem for very many people and take them through that path away from their troubles and through to a point where they can live independently. And I for one are grateful that we have both in this city, and they complement, and there also are other partners that we work with in this city. It's not just the two partners there. Mrs. McKenna, the work that is done by Trinity in stopping the cycle of repeat rough sleeping, I've already said, is such a valuable activity in this city. It's supported by many, many people as a charitable organisation, not just this council. And I for one, am pleased that you've applied for this grant. I think the two roles that you're looking at in terms of the housing manager to support people to remain in accommodation is important, because having moved them there, we don't want them to drop out of that accommodation. It's not a case of they leave your door and they're on their own. And also, I think the work in terms of the Move On Development Coach and the work that you're doing with domestic abuse, it is, I was stunned by the numbers when I was with you and learned how many you actually handle. Is a great piece of work, and I would support both these funding both these roles to continue and develop that work further. Thank you. Moving on, Mrs. Thorburn, do you have anything you wish to add at this point before I move to questions from the councillors?
Thank you, Councillor Westwood. I just thought it might be useful to give you the up-to-date figures as of today of rough sleepers and those in emergency accommodation. So we literally have one single household in emergency accommodation, and we do a return monthly rough sleepers, and the return for the end of January is 1. I think it's really important to note the impact if we don't award this grant, which is clearly set out in point 13 of the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Thorburn. Councillors, do we have any questions? I see no questions. Do we have any debate? No debate. So I'll move on to the recommendation. This paper. Yeah, there. So the recommendation is that the grant of £60,000 to Trinity from the Homeless Prevention Grant can be approved to fund Trinity's housing manager and the Move On Development Coach. Is that agreed?
Great.
Thank you. Okay, if we can move on to the next agenda item, which is, let me read it properly.
Chair, I'd like to say thank you for the grant. I really do appreciate it, and we're committed to ending rough sleeping by next year.
No, thank you. Thank you for that. We appreciate all the work that your organisation does. Say that again. Thank you. So moving on to what is item 7 on the printed agenda, the New Homes Programme and Retrofit Update. There will be presentations just to introduce that. We have 2 major programmes ongoing. Firstly, to continue building new high energy performance homes across our district to add to the more than 5,000 homes that we already have. In addition, we have our retrofit programme, which is a retrofit to our existing homes to meet higher energy standards and to give our tenants warm homes that are affordable to run. In a moment, we'll have an update on the progress of both projects, but before that, Councillor Lee, I believe you wish to speak.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, committee. Thank you for allowing me to speak. The presentation you're about to hear begged a number of questions, which I hope that you'll be able to help me with. And thank you for the update, and good to see progress. So straight into it, please can you clarify the energy efficiency measures, the build standards plus associated carbon savings for, on slide 1, the completed Whiteley homes. The slide says the Association Environmentally Conscious Building reduced carbon emission and fuel bills. Great. But what do you mean? Do you mean the AECB Carbon Light Building Standard with certification, which is only possible with an approved certifier? Have these buildings been certified? And what are the projected carbon and energy emission savings for these homes? For the Southbrook homes, you say they're certified to Passive House Plus. Great. But you talk about approximation for energy and carbon. In my mind and what I understand, a standard is a standard, so can we perhaps be a bit more precise? And on the Winnell flats, what does Passive House AECB mean? It can't be both, unless you really do mean that. Please explain. Which standards are we striving for, and what are the expected carbon savings and energy savings? So grateful for clarification on those issues, and I think it is important that we have clarification. The council has achieved a high carbon literacy recognition, and I believe by providing clarity, we can prove how we walk the talk. And can I ask, can we also perhaps think about celebrating our achievements by sharing them on the Low Energy Buildings database? It's an excellent education dissemination tool, which we should aspire to showing off our achievements. Related to this is the question, does the housing programme record the total carbon and energy savings for all our new homes and retrofit homes, with a clear total contribution to the Carbon Neutrality Action Plan Net Zero targets? If so, how and where are these published? At a previous committee meeting, I raised concerns that we don't seem to be specifying low carbon, high nature insulation products for new build and retrofit contracts. Last week, a company called Ideotherm announced the first UK hemp insulation product, and currently the only natural fibre insulation manufactured in the UK, and accredited to BBA, or British Board Agreement to Certification. This is a huge milestone in helping to decarbonise the construction of the supply chain in the UK, which I hope we, as a council, can take advantage of in our low carbon, high nature ambitions. So it's good to see, I think on slide 23, the subject of hurdles and opportunities. But can you please provide an update on what steps we are taking to reduce, with a view to avoid, use of these environmentally harmful, high carbon, low nature, petrochemical insulation and building products in our housing programme? New homes acquisition strategy. We've talked previously about the continuing inflation in building supply construction costs and the increases to new home build costs. And of course, I understand to address these significant cost pressures and maintain the commitment to delivering 1,000 homes, the business plan has been rebalanced. But can I ask for reassurances that this rebalancing does not change the previous commitment for all new homes to be energy performance standard EPC B+. In other words, we don't want to be buying new homes from developers at a lower standard. And finally, I think it's the presentation slides 7 and 8, schemes in planning or under consideration. Notwithstanding the planning challenges in the South Downs National Park, I can't see any schemes shown for the eastern side of the Winchester district. Some of my parish councils have voiced concerns that without appropriate affordable housing for first-time buyers and the elderly, we are creating social difficulties, especially for the young, who will move to the urban areas. So can I ask, what plans does the housing programme have to fix these problems? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lee. In answer to respond to a few of the questions here, I think some of the questions you've asked will be picked up during the presentations that you're going to see in the next portion. I'll pick up on a couple of the points though. One is the where the carbon savings recorded, and the retrofit programme is and the savings that we make in terms of the carbon footprint energy savings are a part of the reporting of the council's carbon neutrality action plan programme, and they're fed into that area. Secondly, you talk about affordable homes on the map and different areas. I'd refer you to the housing strategy policy paper that was agreed by this committee at the back end of last year in terms of the strategy that we have for moving forwards affordable homes across the whole district. And also, I'd refer you to the upcoming HRA report that we will look at shortly in terms of the strategy for acquiring and building new homes across the district. It's the housing strategy clearly states that we will, and the HRA clearly states that we have to pivot towards more buying with and working with developers at this point in time because of the financial pressures on building homes and the cost of money, interest rates and so on, which we're all very familiar with. But equally, that restricts us to certain larger sites across the district. And the strategy in terms of looking at further smaller sites across the district is to work more closely, and this is defined in that housing strategy, with the parish councillors and the parish councils themselves in terms of identifying exception sites across the district that we can take forwards. Those exception sites in the housing on it clearly need to be developed in line with the housing demand in that area. So we're seeing significant demand for 2-bed homes. So we won't be building 1-bed flats where 2-bed homes are required. And so in that way, we actually want to move forwards with more localised schemes, but working in collaboration with parish councils and parish councils. The other point that needs to be made is that we do need to continue with the development programme ourselves because we need to use our right to buy receipts. So in our plans, there is a plan to develop 70+ of our own buildings across that time because we need to use a right to buy receipts as well. So in terms of filling out that map, there are plans in place to fill out the areas where the demand is, working locally with local parishes, parish councillors, and tie that into our right to buy receipts so that we use the money effectively. Thank you. I can move on. Mr. Maggs, I think you're going first. So Mr. Maggs will give us an update on our new homes programme.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair, and good morning. I'm going to run through a few slides. I'll keep it brief because I know there's a lot on the agenda today. What I will try and do is address some of the points that Councillor Lee made in his representations. I'll talk you through some of the sites that are underway, some detail on those in the pipeline, and also a longer term outlook as well. Firstly, a quick update on Whiteley. 54 homes that I know will be in front of this committee in the past, a mixture of affordable rent and shared ownership. I'm very pleased to say that slide, if I had the chance to do it today, could have been updated because the final property has been reserved down there. So despite the macroeconomic outlook at the moment, those properties gone incredibly well. We've now, when this one completes, we will have sold all the properties and let all the properties down there. The homes have proved very popular indeed with the residents. We'll be doing some post-scheme evaluation in just less than a year's time to ask tenants their views of living there. I'm very pleased as well to say that we're now in discussions with a developer down there to provide additional units, both for general needs, shared ownership and rent, but also for extra care housing for older people as well. Secondly, Southbrook Cottages. Again, this has been in front of a committee. Six units in total, and a really good example of what we can do in our rural communities. Picking up on what Councillor Lee mentioned a moment ago, it's so important to develop within the rural communities as well as in the urban areas. This is not just our first Passive House Plus project; it's one of the very first in the first in the whole country, and there's some indication what the expected impact is going to be both on residents' cost of living costs, but also in terms of carbon emissions. And the reason these are projected is because they're modelled. We need to actually look at how things work in use. Modelling relies on a number of assumptions, location of the buildings in the whole country, not just in terms of simply orientation in a particular locality, and also things such as how residents use those buildings as well. Putting in some technology to assess how those buildings operate in practice. But we're also going to be talking to tenants as well about their experiences. And that information will be used to inform future schemes. Winnell Flats is nearing completion. And I'll be really pleased to organise a visit for any member that wants to see those in a couple of months' time. I think they'll be mightily impressed. I've been up in the last couple of weeks, had a look at the show home, and it's very impressive indeed. And you can see the picture at the bottom right-hand side. Those of you who know Winnell Flats can start to get a feel for the impact that the work to the external space is having as well in terms of environmental quality improvements. And those are car parking spaces you can see at the bottom right hand corner. May not be very exciting in themselves, but in terms of a game changer in the environmental improvements, that area is going to be dramatic. And the brown cross you can see there, a very wide planting beds as well. So greening comes along with this. In addition to the flats, we're going to be improving the green space, laying out a new park by May. So those are due to finish in the very near future. We've launched, or Venture have launched a marketing campaign to assess interest in the flats that are due to become Venture flats, and you can see up there that 250 people have already registered interest in those flats. Sorry, 45 people have already registered interest in those flats. So we're still at early stage in terms of marketing. A lot of interest in those. And in terms of 35 flats and houses up there, which are going to be shared ownership homes, 250 people have already registered interest. And despite the fact the scheme isn't finished, 2 properties have already been reserved, and I believe there's another one that we're hoping to be reserved this week. So the whole scheme will be completed by the end of this month. Next out of the blocks is Woodman Close. Again, another example of a rural scheme. 5 units up there, plan permissions in place. We went out to tender at the end of last week, and we're due to start on site in Q3 of this year. And as I say, part of our commitment to build on in smaller settlements. I've just listed a few schemes. It's not a comprehensive list. A few schemes that are under consideration at the moment. Corner House is a scheme, a conversion scheme in Winchester, which will guarantee the long-term future of a building in a conservation area. That's going to go to planning committee this Wednesday with a recommendation for approval. So we're hopeful that will get a consent, and with a fair wind, we'll get out on site in that in autumn of this year. Mitchell Deaver Cottages, 8 units there. Winecross Cottages, a refurbishment or a redevelopment of existing council house site, to more than 100% increase the number of units on that site. Schemes in Stanmore, at Minden Way and Fox Lane. I've already mentioned the very last bullet point, the extra care and general needs down at Whiteley. We've been working very closely with our architects and other developers to develop an extra care scheme for Kings Barton. We just completed a project brief on that particular site, and we'll be going back to Carla Holmes to talk about that in more detail during the course of this month. So a slide that I won't dwell on this, but it just illustrates the distribution of schemes across the district. Again, this isn't exclusive. Picking up on Councillor Lee's point about what appears to be the dearth of schemes in the eastern part of the district, I'm really pleased to say that we're now able to build upon a previously, and some of you remember this, previously really successful Hurrah programme, which developed 400 homes across the whole of the county in rural parts of the county, and we got the lion's share. The city council got the lion's share of those. DEFRA have just awarded funding to Action Hampshire to in effect relaunch that programme over 18 months, and we're starting to work very close with Action Hampshire at looking at the particular parishes that we want to work in and where parishes want to do some more rural housing. So I'm confident we'll be able to relaunch that rural housing programme in the course of this year, and a number of sites in the eastern part, a number of parishes in the eastern part of the district look as though they've got prospects and indeed an appetite for more rural housing. A summary of the new homes programme to date. I won't read out any figure there, other than that 274. So by the end of this month, by the time this committee meets again, we'll have completed 274 new homes. Winnell and Southbrook Cottage will be two of those schemes that come forward in the next few months. And I think finally, just to give you an idea about longer term projections taking up to the end of the decade, the top blue line gives us an idea of where we're going in terms of direction of travel, the trajectory, to look at we're on course for actually exceeding 1,000 new homes by 2030. The yellow line is important. It illustrates variations in delivery over the course of that time period. There will be, in terms of completions, there'll be boom periods, there'll be fallow periods, but during the whole of that time period, we're working on new schemes and making sure there's a future pipeline of new council housings in the City Council's area. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Max. I think we have time for a couple of questions. If anybody has questions for Mr. Max on what's just presented. Councillor Hurrell.
The side, Chair. I think there's been a question about learning from Winnell. Having been at the start of the Winnell project, the commitment we made to the residents nearby to enhance their area outside, the parking, the roadways, the general open space, was very much welcomed and helped us to actually get approval for that scheme alongside the blocks that were already there. So the idea that we're building not just homes, but we're enhancing a community, I think is something we should take on board. And I think where we're looking in other places, we need to just be very aware of that, because that helps to integrate everyone and make everyone feel that their community is really valued and it's not just another house, another flat. I just wondered whether we could take on board that learning and make sure that we weave that in to our new homes programme going forward. I don't know how you feel about that, Chair, or indeed the officers, and how they might apply that knowledge and learning. Thank you.
Thank you. And in response to that, I mean, you're pushing an open door there, because it's, yeah, I agree with you that it's not just about the home, it's about the environment. And we're moving on a little bit later in this meeting to talk around the impact of the Social Housing Regulation Act and the way that we act and interact with our residents, tenants and leaseholders as landlord. And it's not just about the houses, it's about the community. And what you're talking about there is the community, and I absolutely wholeheartedly behind that, whether it be in our existing estates or in our new builds, both of them. Thank you. Any further questions? Councillor Hurrell, I'm not sighing, honestly, and you know that I work with you as collaborative as possibly can. That's fine.
Chair, can I just endorse the whole point about rural? I was a great advocate for Hurrah when it existed. Councillor Lee raises the question why there are no places on my side of the map. I would advocate for any city councillor to grab their parish councils and advocate. The reason they're in Sparshott and Micheldever is no accident. It's because we've been working for a long time, actually, because these are relationships that build. And I think maybe there's an opportunity for the housing team, because we have a whole new set of councillors in the City Council, to make them aware of the opportunity that they can drive over time to encourage schemes to start in their areas. No better people to do that, to give you that intel, is the parish councils that we all represent in the outside of the city area. So I wonder whether that's something, Chair, the housing team can do in one of their briefings to us all about what that opportunity might look like and how we could help facilitate that. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Are there any final questions at this point? So I'll just sum up there. So Mr. Mays, thank you for your work and the work of the New Homes team. It's incredibly inspiring to see the new homes. I have visited both North Whiteley and Winnell and looked inside the places and walked around the grounds. And whilst the work at Winnell on the grounds isn't yet complete, it will be. And that's a programme to go forwards. I think what we're seeing there is the future of council homes going forwards, and what I'm seeing is very, very bright indeed, and that's the standard of work we need to continue delivering. The Hurrah programme, I'd say hurrah to that, because I agree that that is a programme that we need to take forwards, and as I say, it was discussed at the housing strategy paper and is part of that paper. And and again, we've had this discussion before, that I agree that we need to get our councillors across the district more involved, but equally get the parish council involved. And I absolutely will be taking forwards with the team broader communication about all these programmes and the good work that the whole housing team is doing, and work more collaboratively. So Councillor Lee work more collaboratively with parishes that are further afield, and certainly the Councillor Pett in your area, I've already had this discussion with in the Meon Valley area. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Max. Move on to Ms. Burbridge to talk about the retrofit programme and update that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair. Good morning. I'm hoping for this presentation to really take you through generally what our tenant uptake has been in comparison to what we're offering, the status of our delivery. I'll take you through each of the programs to explain what it is we're offering in those programs, and then looking at lastly at obviously at the delivery status and the tenant engagement program. Next slide, please. So this slide really tries to describe the relationship between what it is we're offering tenants versus the take-up. And in property or in programs such as the Retrofit Ready, the energy assessments and the pilot cavity wall insulation, we're not necessarily going into people's properties and doing work. These are ones where we're on the outskirts, and there's far greater uptake in those than the ones where we're doing loft insulation, we're doing various ventilation upgrades. So it's already just an illustration that where we're touching the outside of the property, or we're just doing an energy assessment, we're in there for an hour or 2 hours, there's a greater uptake. And the other ones, it's not only the tenant uptake, but it also is other factors that contribute to the works when delivering those schemes. Next slide, please. That's just a graphic that demonstrates the uptake versus the offering. So Retrofit Ready, we offered 1585 properties that were EPC-D and below, houses and bungalows. And we just got over half that accepted the offer on energy assessments. These energy assessments are being rolled out at the moment. But really it's a case of giving tenants the opportunity to come forward and accept the offering a bit more in the next few months, and that really ties quite firmly into the tenant engagement strategy. Next slide, please. These numbers really are just an indication of the delivery status. The important columns really to look at are properties complete versus revised target properties. So the revisions are of a number of things, as I explained: tenant engagement, tenant take-up, various elements that add to delivery of retrofits, which I'll speak to at a later slide. Probably the most successful at the moment is the void loft insulation, cavity wall insulation, and I said the cavity wall insulation pilot, where we offered 75 properties, but actually we're delivering 80 because there was a greater take up of that. The energy assessments, as I said, are being rolled out. There was a slight dip in December due to not being able to contact tenants, but those are being continued to roll out. And those really inform the other programs such as SHDF LOFTS, which is the Social Housing Decarbonisation LOFT program, and the C4 measures program. And that really is targeting properties that are already EPC4. But generally, I just want to explain that really the target is to get our baseline right in all our properties. Is the base correct? Loft insulation, cavity wall insulation, ventilation, door undercuts. You know, this is an opportunity to really make sure all our houses are sitting at the right standard in which we can then move forward and look at various technologies. Next slide, please. So each of these slides take you through the improvements we are offering in these programs. The SHDF was very much tied to the legibility requirement. So yeah, we're providing loft insulation. We have to upgrade ventilation whenever we put insulation into properties, and then trickle vents and door undercuts. So we've got a target of 70 properties. We've got 46 take up at the moment. The contractors are beginning to roll out in the last week. So we should see that delivery go up. And we do have 2 contractors on boots on ground at the moment. So we should see that delivery pick up substantially over the next month. Next slide, please. SHDF LOFT. So this really is just an indication of why it is tricky to get those properties really, because it's not just the tenant take up, which we see was 20%, 21% no's. It's whether, is there asbestos in the areas the contractors are working at? Is there damp and mold? Is there ventilation? And the ventilation is quite a big question. It's not just making sure there's extract ventilation, but it's making sure that the eaves are vented, that the roof is well vented. So there's quite a number of criteria before we can put forward a property. And you can see from the slide, there's only 10% that really make it through that strict criteria. Next slide, please. The retrofit ready, which I just explained, the EPCC 4 measures. Again, it's just making sure that those properties that already meet EPCC are also being attended to, are being looked at, because through the cavity wall insulation pilot, which I described earlier on, it really was evident that of the 75 properties that we targeted, 75 properties, actually we've gone to 80, needed cavity wall insulation redone. So there's opportunity there to really make sure that the insulation that we put in is doing its job and working. So on the EPC, we've got 150 properties we're targeting, 24 to date. And as I say, the contractors are delivering as we speak. Next slide, please. I won't hop on about this one, but I think I've explained this sufficiently. Next slide. Voids, cavity wall and loft insulation. This is rolling out. There's been a dip in December because there's always a void dip in December, but it's picking up, and it really is, again, an opportunity to make sure that as we hand properties over to tenants, it's got a good baseline in terms of its thermal performance. Next slide, please. We upgraded timber doors. There were 24. That is now complete. Next slide, please. This is just retrofit program, the hurdles that I've discussed already versus the opportunities that we're taking. So often when properties come through from energy assessments, we discover damp and mold, we discover ventilation not being what it needed to be, or asbestos. And it really is an opportunity for us, and we do this within the team, is to instruct a survey, to assess the issue, and then upgrade it and make it part of the retrofit program. So we work quite closely with planned maintenance, where asbestos is, there's a trend in asbestos, that gets handed over to planned maintenance, and a program will develop from that. When we look at specialist contractors, and we know that within this sector that's difficult to find skilled contractors, we're working really closely along with our partners to ensure that they too are upskilling themselves, and we continue to work with them. With regards to materials, and I'd like to address Councillor Lee's question about embodied carbon. As a team, we look at embodied carbon quite closely. However, the debate within that at the moment, as the sector is still growing, is fire. So fire obviously trumps the embodied carbon. And when there's new materials that come forward, they often, as we've seen in the IWI properties, the internal wall insulation pilots, they are more like 7 to 10 times more that of insulation that we do use. So it really is fire and value for money that plays into that embodied carbon. But as time goes, we no doubt will be being able to pick up more materials that fulfill that requirement. And then tenant uptake. Yeah, it's quite exciting. We're really getting involved and stuck in terms of how we get involved with our tenants, raising that awareness and finding tenants and champions, which we'll play a video for you in a minute. Next slide, please. This slide I've shown before, so it's just the before and after on the Swedish cottages, before and after. The internal wall insulation voids, these properties are faring quite well. I visited them. We were working closely with the tenants to make sure we've got quite a lot of learning from these properties. And then the cavity wall insulation, just illustration that there was a need for it and there still is. So going forward, that program will pick up. Next slide, please. Tenant engagement, which I've touched on. We began tenant engagement really full swing in October last year, where we had Swedish forums. We had 4 tenant Swedish forums in the 4 different areas. There was a good response. There was a good dialogue with tenants. We started to create a web page on our website to boost that up, make it more clear, more descriptive to tenants and more engaging, because retrofit is quite a bit of a science, so it's difficult to explain, but we really are trying to use infographics, videos where we can to make it a little bit more simpler to understand. In December, we finished the tenant engagement strategy, again, quite an exciting piece of work. And then as we go forward, we're approaching those no's through telephone calls, pamphlets, making sure we can bring those tenants back on board and give them a second opportunity to say yes. And then we've also got very exciting coffee mornings coming up where we invite those that said yes and those that say no. We interact with them and see where we can dissuade those that said no and bring and reaffirm and reassure those that have accepted the work that it will be carried out. The next slide. This is just a short video which I'll play that describes the loft insulation and the reason why we shouldn't compress it, but also the benefits.
It's absolutely worth it, because if your house was cold like ours was all the time, this certainly has made it better for us and made life a lot more easier inside, and we're toasty. Definitely cut the bills down.
We noticed a difference in the house even before the actual heating was switched on, with all the cladding work that's been done. It's so warm and toasty in here.
Thank you. In summary, as I discussed, the website revision is almost complete, 60% there. We're just looking to have a narrative, a video that describes and explains to tenants using a voice rather than just words to take them through all the programs that we're running. Tenant engagement plan is now complete. And we really are working quite closely with comms to get that voice and the tone right to our tenants, to make sure that we're more approachable and more understanding of issues that we need to bring into account when doing retrofit. So the initial targets of 522 properties with 898 measures. For the reasons I explained, we've revised that to 439 properties to 914 measures. And we've completed 226 properties and 301 measures. And as I say, over the last week and a half, those would have increased. Thank you very much. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks very much, Prashanta. That was brilliant presentation. Thank you. I have time for a few questions. Any questions? Councillor Rutter.
Chair, thank you very much for that presentation. I'm quite concerned that quite a lot do refuse even the initial assessment. Presumably, we're trying to find out why they refuse and address those concerns. But I'd like to just hear that. I know you're doing a lot on engagement with people and so on. Another question is, are we putting in are we doing this work when there are voids, so when the between tenants? Do we have time to do that, or does it take too long? And would that keep housing out of tenancy for too long? And the final question is, I know that quite a lot of tenants refuse the loft insulation because they use that loft for storage. And I know there's been quite a lot of resentment among some tenants that they're losing their storage space in the loft, and we're not offering them any alternative. So can I ask, is that the case? Are we offering them any alternative sort of storage for the stuff that they've got in their lofts? And if not, can we consider that as a way of encouraging them to come forward and have that insulation put in? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Rutter. So I'll just answer your first questions and then I'll move on to the storage. So with regards to the voids, we are taking the opportunity in voids to put cavity wall insulation and loft insulation as a standard. In terms of getting an energy assessment done in those properties, it's quite tricky because of the time. We don't want to hinder it. But where tenants, and in terms of why tenants are saying no, it's for various reasons, but we really are. We kind of started the program before the tenant engagement. So the tenant engagement is kind of catching up, but I think we are at a place where we are almost caught up. And we're really starting to engage with tenants a lot more. We've got a fantastic tenant liaison officer on the team at the moment. She's working really hard to change those no's into yeses, and we have seen movement. So we really think with these coffee mornings, with the website, the momentum will pick up. In terms of the loft storage that has gone around, there's quite a lot of risk that was highlighted as to why we wouldn't provide storage in the lofts. It has been agreed within the last 3 weeks that we would provide a platform for maintenance, but because we still have to ensure that our tenants are safe, we cannot wholeheartedly say within our lease agreements that we open storage because of fire risks, because of falling, asbestos, etc. So we are providing a platform which we're saying is for maintenance, and if tenants were to store items, it would be at their own risk. This was really to come over this whole storage where access is also going to be assessed. So contractors will go and make sure that they assess the access, so that where people can't actually put a ladder up, we are providing ladders, but if it's too close to the landing, in terms of construction design management 2015, this is a regulation, HSC regulation, where we need to make sure that access is safe. Where we are able to, we provide. If not, we are looking at providing potential sheds. Again, it will be for the tenants to take on that as a responsibility as they own, to manage and to maintain. Thank you.
Councillor Becker.
Too many microphones. Oh, I should have chosen the other one. Thank you for that. I've got a couple of questions. You mentioned about some properties being ineligible for these upgrades because damp and mold or asbestos were identified. Can I just confirm, do we take any steps with where those things are identified to make sure that they're not posing a health risk to tenants? Second question, what is a Swedish forum? It's not a term I've come across before. And third, you mentioned the coffee mornings. I just wanted to check, are we making sure that those are on different days of the week and possibly in weekends, and maybe consider evenings as well? We know we have lots and lots of tenants who work full time, so getting along to a coffee morning is actually really difficult for lots of our tenants. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor. So in terms of the asbestos and where properties are not eligible, if they do have damp and mold, as I said, we work quite closely with planned maintenance. We also work quite closely with response maintenance. So if we don't pick it up as a retrofit team, we ensure the response picks it up and we follow that property through until we can pick it up. Or because we're working with the same contractors, we ask the contractors to do a damp and mold survey, and will the insulation actually help that issue, or is it a greater issue? And the repairs are very much followed through by the team. In terms of the asbestos, it usually is in the eaves outside of the properties, and this is a much bigger program that we're looking at with planned maintenance to ensure that we pick these properties up and they do become eligible. So hopefully we'll do terraces and streets and do it in a far more methodical way. But what it gives us is really an opportunity to investigate that and see that it does exist. And then in terms of the Swedish form, my apologies, I always assume everybody understands. Swedish cottages are prefabricated post-war cottages where we are doing whole house retrofit. There's 26 of them. We've done a pilot of 5, 21 are still to be done. We can only deliver them within a no bat and no bird season, which is autumn to early winter. So because of it was funded by BEIS under the SHDF funding, we missed this season and we're due to deliver in autumn this coming year, 2024. And I'm now lost with the last question. Apologies.
It's all right. The coffee mornings.
The coffee mornings. Yes, sorry. So the coffee mornings are a much smaller group of people. The demographic is very much known and age of tenants. So we have given them the opportunity. We've reached quite a widespread in terms of that area. But because the demographic is known, we've kind of set the time according to when we know they would be available. If it was kind of working moms or parents, or the times would vary, but a lot of these are of a certain age that will be able to make the time. And really in those, it's kind of just making sure all the ones that said yes come, and we have a wider spread of tenants. But yes, we have 2, we've got them at different times, and we have engaged with tenants about the timing before we set it.
Thank you. Councillor Miller.
Thank you very much. When we're looking at removing asbestos from our own properties, if houses next door were council houses but are now bought privately, are we considering offering them the opportunity to have it done at the same time at their expense? But it's much more efficient if you're removing asbestos to have teams on doing the whole block rather than every other one sort of thing.
Thank you. I will ask Ms Beveridge to answer that, but I suspect the answer is no at this point in time.
The answer actually isn't no, because where we sorry, Councillor, where we're dealing with terraces, it's almost impossible to just cut off where your eaves ends and where your neighbours. Usually the asbestos insulated board, which is the thing that we come across most in terms of the eaves, is spread between, it doesn't go, well, there's a party wall, let me end. It kind of spreads. So the cost is the scaffolding. And if we've got, if we've got a property on either side, which is what we encountered in the internal wall insulation properties, by the time you put up the cost, it's not the changing of the eaves, it's the actual, getting the contractors up there. So where the properties are between our properties, we have to, in essence, do those properties to get them safe. But when they're isolated, then obviously we won't be, we haven't yet.
Thank you. Okay, I have 2 more questions lined up, and then I need to draw the line there because I've got a long agenda. So Councillor Horrell, then Councillor Bathory in that order.
Chair, thank you. For the Swedish properties that are delayed until the latter part of this year, but some of them have issues, are we within the repairs team looking after those properties in the short term where they have maybe damp and mould before they can be completed properly? And secondly, I wasn't sure that I was clear from Councillor Rutter's question to you. What is driving the no? I don't know that I heard, what are the top 2 or 3 reasons that people are saying no? And again, as councillors, I think we could be a good voice in the community for you if you understood that. We can advocate in our communities where there may be a negative view of this, and we could give positive stories. So if you could actually articulate that more for us, that would be helpful. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Horrell. In terms of the Swedish cottages, and I'm very fully aware of the damp and mould in some of the properties, and we are working with response maintenance. So in all our retrofit properties, where, as I was explained to Councillor Becker, that where we have come across damp and mold and we're not quite ready to retrofit, we've also got a pilot on the areas properties which are in the same situation. We are working with Response. The thing with the retrofit team is that I cannot put insulation on a property that I don't feel is right yet for insulation. So it's in my best interest to make that repair, make sure the repairs are done properly and the property is dried out before we do any work to it. So we are working quite closely with Response in order to make that work solid in terms of its addressing the damp and mold in those properties before we all deliver. So that is definitely being picked up. In terms of what the tenant, the reason I hadn't been very clear about the top two reasons is because they aren't necessarily top two reasons in terms of the tenants. Often it's the timing, often it's hearsay, often it is the loft and we need storage. Often it is, you know, what they're going through personally. So it's not, there isn't a top two. I can't actually say it's definitely X or Y. It very much is a widespread, you know, every tenant is in our housing for a reason and they have their own individual stresses. So we're having to, you know, make sure that any work that comes into their homes, they are kind of already pressured by their circumstances. So it is a case of it's quite widespread. It's storage, it's, you know, my kid is ill or my husband's just come from hospital or it's not good timing. Or hearsay, I've heard that, you know, we don't have to do this or we don't need it. So it is just making sure that tenant engagement catches up, because the more we can get the tenants engaged in coffee mornings, in forums, the more we can answer those questions and make sure that the easy questions are answered. And it's more the personal issues that we obviously can't resolve. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you. And Councillor Bathory.
Thank you very much, and just want to say thank you for the presentation. And it's really encouraging to see that already we're having successes with this programme. I was just wondering whether we have any quantifiable benefits for the tenants that have had this work done to their properties as a way that could support that tenant engagement for those tenants that haven't yet taken up this offer, because obviously it would add to that sort of encouragement for those that haven't already done so to then add to join the programme. So just wondered if we were doing any work with those tenants that have had the programme already implemented about the quantified financial benefits that they may have received from it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. So it's very tricky, I would say, in order for us to put in a number, because all properties react differently. So we have said that tenants would save, but we haven't added a number there, because where we've done whole house, obviously it's much greater. But again, the heating factor really contributes to it. So if I'm on gas and you're in electricity, irrespective of whether we've had the same insulation work done, it's very different. So I don't necessarily want tenants to kind of go, well, you said 300 and actually it's 200. We have said to tenants where we've done work, it's lifted from EPC E to a C. And really with the EPC, although it's quite a general way of, you know, kind of demonstrating performance, it really is kind of a better way, I suppose, rather than a value.
Just to clarify, my suggestion wasn't necessarily us you know, sort of giving a guarantee to tenants that this would be the reduction they would see, more an inquiry of the tenants that have had the work done as to what they see financially as reduction as a result of that work. So as with the example you showed there of the tenants in Cheriton, actually quantifiable, asking them, you know, in terms of their actual bills, what have you seen? I just think that maybe some people would actually respond more to a financial reduction in terms of the outgoings that they might have, especially with the cost of living, to this type of programme, than just by somebody saying that they're cosy. Thank you.
Great, thank you for that. We will do that in the future.
Okay. Can I thank the whole retrofit team, not just Ms. Burridge, the whole group there for the work that's been done on this over the last 9 months since I've been portfolio holder here. This has been an absolute step change in terms of the delivery and the benefits that we're rolling out and giving to our residents. And we've ramped this up from virtually nothing to the stage where we're going to hit a number that will be in excess, I believe, of over 400 in this financial year. And clearly, we will be planning for next year and trying to drive that with pace at next year as well. I think the lessons we've learnt over the last 9 months are not just the technical issues about upgrading. It is the fact that the communication program and the involvement and the encouragement and the endorsements are as much a major part of the program as it is doing the physical upgrades to the properties. And you've seen from the couple of the slides that presented that we are focusing on working very hard to communicate the benefits and get people on board. And this program, the success of it will be driven by success as we roll through it. I thank you for the changes that you've made in terms of the loft policy and so on. I've been pretty vocal about that. We've made progress there, treating people in the right way is absolutely fundamental. We are going into people's homes, right? And we need to go in there with respect, and we need to do the job properly, tidily, and leave the benefit behind. So thank you for the whole team. Thank you for the councillors for the questions. And I think I'll close that debate there. Thank you. We're going to move on to item number 8 on the agenda, which is the Housing Revenue Account budget. So I think Councillor Becker, you need to leave. I have no councillor or public speakers on this particular item. I have with me, can I welcome Mr. Johnson to the meeting, and thank you for joining us today. So Mr. Johnson is here and is able to take any specific questions you've got in the HRA business plan and accounts going forwards. But prior to that, I'll introduce the paper. So the HRA is experiencing an unprecedented financial challenge. This is of a magnitude never seen in the sector since we took over responsibility for self-financing our social housing business from the previous government subsidy scheme back in 2012. The Housing Revenue Account is operated as a ring-fenced landlord account for the provision of social housing to our tenants. It must self-finance, and to ensure financial sustainability, the rents and service charges must be sufficient to fund the expenditure incurred to own, operate, and continually invest in properties. The financial planning horizon for the HRA is 30 years. It must annually produce a viable 30-year business plan to demonstrate its ability to self-finance and show it has capacity for ambitions to deliver new affordable homes for people across the district. We're in a period of high inflation, which is slowly reducing, with interest rates that are higher than experienced over many decades. In addition, building costs have increased by 23% over the last year and 58% over the last 2 years. The cost of living crisis has not gone away and is hitting our most vulnerable tenants hard. We're proud to have over 5,000 homes in the Winchester council homes in the Winchester district. To improve the energy efficiency of our homes, we're investing £45 million into retrofitting the fabric of our council homes to lower tenants' energy costs and to provide warmer and more comfortable homes. We have to prioritise how and where we spend our tenants' money to deliver best value, and it's right now that we have 2 significant work programmes that both improve the quality and comfort of our existing housing stock alongside delivering more highly energy efficient new homes. Increasing the rent for our social housing and affordable housing is always a difficult decision. We have to balance this with our need to have a balanced HRA. The real need in this district, in all districts in the country, for more affordable housing, and the need to upgrade our existing homes to provide our tenants with warmer homes that are less expensive to run. After a consultation process with the TACT committee and TACT focus groups, we've decided to increase rents by 7.7%, which is in line with the government rent policy. I'm also pleased to say that TACT have supported that decision, and I thank them both for the support that has allowed us to get to that decision today. So thank you very much, Mr. Chafe, Mr. Perkins, and other members of TACT and the TACT support group who work with us in that area. I'm able to present today a viable and sustainable business plan, which not only includes an investment of £45 million to go greener faster by retrofitting our homes to bring them up to decent homes energy standards, but also reaffirms our commitment to 1,000 homes target, albeit over a slightly longer time period. The HRA business planning is carried out annually, and all assumptions are revisited and undertaken afresh each year. When the economic situation improves, with interest rates and building costs at more reasonable levels, we will aim to deliver our 1,000 home target earlier, and indeed look to exceed that target of 1,000 homes. In order to be viable, the business plan assumes several changes in strategy from previous years. These are detailed in the report, but in summary, they include proposals to continue the new approach of acquiring more homes from developers alongside our previous approach of building new homes ourselves. A £400,000 revenue savings plan for the housing service, disposal of surplus assets to help fund the increased greener, faster capital investment in our existing homes, and an investment to digitalise and modernise processes to make them more accessible, simpler, quicker and easier for our customers. Also, to make it possible for contact to be online 24/7 for those that prefer it. Cabinet have been asked to note these assumptions in the detailed HRA 24-25 budget that will be recommended to Council in February 2024. Additionally, Council are asked to approve the HRA budget and business plan for 24-25. The full day details are in the paper, but include the average formula rent increase for affordable and social housing of 7.7% in line with current government rent policy, a cap of 7.7% increase in tenant service charges for 24-25, the future asset disposal policy for the next 8 years, and specifically the disposal in principle of Barnes House in 2024-25, a move to 80% market rents for eco-friendly new homes that meet the Council's energy efficient requirements, where the rent increase is more than offset by lower running costs. Subject to further consultation and review of costs, the move towards full cost recovery for private and tenant connections to the Council's sewage treatment works in 25-26. Despite the challenging circumstances we face, I believe this is a strong plan that addresses those circumstances whilst improving the service and housing we make available to the current and future tenants who rely on them. Mrs. Knight, was there anything that you wanted to add to that, or Mr. Johnson?
Thank you, Chair.
Just to say, Chair, that it has been a very challenging couple of years, the last two, and that obviously the HRA has finite resources, so it has been very challenging to meet all of the needs. But we've come through basically because we've looked at finding efficiencies around revenue savings and also around making sure that we're disposing of assets for surplus requirements.
Thank you. I'll move to questions. So, sorry, I was asking if there were any speakers. There are no public or council speakers on this paper. I'll move on to questions. So, do any councillors have questions on the paper? Councillor Horrell.
Chair, I have 2 or 3. I don't know whether you want me to just ask one and come back to me later. I think, like many of us, we are concerned at the recommendation of the 80% market rent in 13.5 on the new homes. And I think it would be helpful, Chair, if you just reiterated that this is obviously in the light that our understanding is that the bills for those homes will be significantly less because of the way they're being built, and that is not a forerunner, a red flag for a change in our strategy in terms of rents. But also, what influence, Chair, will the LHA rate changing have as best that we can understand that at this point. I know that they were waiting for more data, but I'd appreciate some further reassurance around 13.5 and the elements that you've articulated there. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Horrell. Yeah, let me give you that assurance that the move to 80% market rent for the properties is the properties of the type that you saw in the New Homes Programme presentation. Those homes that we have at North Whiteley, those homes that we will shortly have at Winnell. And those homes are significantly lower in energy usage, 70% lower. And if you were to take the rent, the 80% rent plus the running costs of those properties will be lower than the 70% rent. The second point is that at 80% market rent, the services are included in that rent, with the lower 70% services are not included in our additional payments as well. So, yeah, I'm absolutely comfortable that move to 80% will provide overall lower costs for living in that particular home. And this is not a precursor to move to 80% market rent across all of our housing. It simply applies to those houses that are of superior specification, as we've heard today, and will provide better homes for our tenants and will run at lower cost. Our retrofit programme, working alongside our new home programme, is trying to drive warmer, more comfortable homes for all of our tenants, and there is at this stage no intention of moving those rents from where they are in terms of the social and market rents. On the second point around the LHA rates, then the LHA rates will not be known for a couple of months now, and maybe Mr. Johnson, you could add to that, please.
Sorry, there are indicative LHA rates that are being published, and for Winchester it ranges obviously dependent on the size of the property. So for instance, I think a 2 or 3 bed is 16% increase on what we had, which was previously fixed 3 years ago. The issue here is that there's no guarantee that the LHA will continue to increase in line with property inflation, whereas the 80% is linked to the rental value of the property.
Thank you. Any further questions? Councillor Cutler.
Wrong one. It's just a suggestion really based on that discussion about the 80%, and that is whether, as we bring new schemes forward, there'll obviously be evidence of the energy efficiency and maybe some calculation that we could show the fact that they're actually cheaper to live in at 80% rent than they would be at lower energy at 70%. And it may be worth bringing that back to these committees, as this committee, as the schemes come forward. I don't know if we can consider that, Chair.
No, that's a very good suggestion, Councillor Cutler, and I'll have that discussion with the officers after this meeting. Any further questions? Councillor Horrell.
Chair, asset disposals, and I've heard that obviously from Mr. Johnson that we need some cash, 14.3. I wonder whether we've got the cart before the horse. You've already indicated that officers are working on a temporary accommodation a challenge and to better understand what the needs are for the area. Barnes House is not necessarily ideal, but it is something that we currently own, and whether we should hold off making a decision on that. There are other things that potentially we could bring forward rather than selling Barnes House in the short term until we better understand what the officers' review of temporary accommodation needs and what we're aiming to achieve in the future might be. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Mrs. Thorburn, could you respond to that? Thank you.
you, Councillor Westwood. I'll try my best. Yes, we are doing a review of temporary accommodation, and before we look at disposing of any asset, there's a rigorous process that we go through as a service. And whilst we do need more temporary accommodation, I feel that we've explored every opportunity of how we could improve Barnes House to meet the current need of our residents, and unfortunately it just doesn't work for lots of different reasons, not just financial. Barnes House really played a really good purpose when we had it, but unfortunately I don't think that type of accommodation is the accommodation that we need going forward. And when we then looked at other options with new homes about converting that into individual flats for families, single households, disabled units, unfortunately it just couldn't stack up financially. And also there's an inordinate amount of work there to be done that would need to meet the fire regulations. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Bafo.
Thank you. One of the other sort of income streams that obviously is referred to is right to buy. And just wondered what the current sort of level of right to buy transfer has happened, and what's now being sort of anticipated in the sort of forecast that you're bringing forward today. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. So the business plan itself is based on our experience of right to buy since its enhanced introduction in 2012, and roughly each year we're selling about 21 properties, of which a third are flats, and the business plan assumes that continues into the future. So far this year it looks like we are continuing that trend. In terms of utilising those right to buy receipts, we're a little ahead of the curve at the moment, so we've probably got 2 years until we need to be spending them seriously again. But they changed the rules a little while ago, so you now have 5 years instead of 3 years to spend the receipts.
Thank you. Councillor Horrell.
Chair, I think we're all in agreement based on an earlier conversation this morning about the need in the new strategy for new homes to purchase, but to pay particular attention to the rural communities and some of the smaller developments, so we don't end up just being orientated to big schemes like a Kings Barton or a Sir John Moore. Do we have sufficient resources in this budget to make sure that we can facilitate that? Because obviously some of those smaller schemes take time and money just to even get to first base and find whether they're viable. Do we have, and we've heard about the resurrection of Hurrah, which is a great thing, and money coming to that. But as a city council, given that we want to keep that geographic spread because we have a very diverse district, do we have the resources in this budget to be able to facilitate that commitment that I think we've all universally supported this morning? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Johnson, are you able to answer that?
Yes, in putting the plan together, we've looked at providing a mixed basket of resources overall. So obviously we're basing it on £4,600 a square metre of build cost and 5% interest rates. But essentially the provision is based on a mixture of grant funded, right to buy funded and Section 106 funded properties going forward.
Thank you. Councillor Rutter.
Quick question, Chair, if I may. Do you know how much right to buy has cost the council over the years? And what is the ongoing annual cost to the council of right to buy, even though we get some receipts back?
So, Councillor Rutter, on the first question, I don't know, because the right to buy has been in existence since about 1980. So I'm not sure we've got that data, but essentially for every successful right to buy on average, people receive a discount of around about 102,000 on the valuation of their property.
That's the cost to the council, over £100,000 per property.
But at the same time, it does release resources to reinvest in new affordable housing.
Equivalent resources?
Yes, so essentially we get to keep almost 2/3 of the receipt at the moment because the government have given up their share of the right to buy for this year. Yes.
So effectively, it costs us about £33,000 then per sale.
Sorry.
If we keep 2/3 of the 100,000.
No, the 100,000 is a discount. So whatever the value of the property is, say
Oh,
the
okay.
average value is 350,000, then people would buy the property for 102,000 less than that. And we would have to
We only
recycle the
keep
rest of the
2/3
receipts.
of that.
2/3.
Yes.
For the balance.
2/3 the balance.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Perkins, I believe did you want to speak?
Thank you. I just wanted to comment really on the where we're at with the rent increase. And those that following earlier TAC meetings, we requested some more details of how the account was constructed and what was contained within it. I just want to place on record that we're very grateful to the council for taking this on board by using display charts and detailed explanations provided to TAC. From the clarity of which we were, it gave us so much more than we'd had previously. We have been able to support the planned increase of 7.7%. The details have also given TAC members a more informed view of the implications that market inflation and all the changes have on various other elements of the housing revenue account. So thank you very much.
And thank you for your kind words. And when we first met, and I first met with TAC, we talked about making it simple for communication, and I think that's an example of where we tried to do that. And I'm really pleased that it's worked in this instance, and this is something that we will continue to do going forwards, is to talk in plain language, simple terms, pictures, so that everybody understands what's going on and we can work very collaboratively. Are there any final questions from councillors at this point, to anybody else at the team? No final questions there. So move on to debate. Any debate on this paper? Councillor Horrell.
Chair, we haven't touched on it particularly, but this is slightly different from the original outline draft of the budget, which is I welcome the approach you're taking to take your time to review service charges, both for our tenants, but also how we try and reallocate our sewerage costs effectively. I think taking that time to involve everyone and look at the nuances of all of that, given that we have capped service charges for a little while, is to be welcomed. And I think involving the tenants and having a broader discussion about that will be much welcomed. I also welcome today the sort of on record comment that we are committed to delivering new homes across the district. I think you've heard that there is support for that from the broader councillor community, and that although you have changed the strategic direction for the new homes in the short term in terms of buying more properties, that we still need to look at that geography across the entire district, and to ensure that we have appropriate resources, both human and financial, to be able to do that. And I welcome the recommendation of Councillor Cutler to ensure that when we have new homes that are coming forward with the 80% level, that we're very clear about the financials for our tenants, so that they can see the full picture of their rent and their costs as they move into those new homes. And so I think, Chair, this morning we've had a chance to add hopefully some positives to this budget, and I thank the officers for the effort that they've made to keep such an important part of the council's work on track and obviously financially stable. We should be very proud of what we do for all of our residents across the district. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Horrell. Any further debate? Councillor Cutler.
Just a couple of comments I'd like to make. I mean, the first one is I'm really intrigued to hear what TACT have got to say about understanding the accounts, because I'd like to know who put that together so that I can perhaps do the same with the general fund account and get that across to people clearly, because there are times when it's not clearly understood. Just one other comment really is around full cost recovery. I think you know, it's clear that we have to look at full cost recovery both on service charges and on sewage works. But we need to also be clear that that doesn't mean that we're not looking at the costs. You know, that we just say we can recover whatever it costs. As a council, we must be always looking at how efficient the services that we're providing, that we're asking people to pay for. And so that needs to be a very key part of what we do. But otherwise, I strongly support this this paper.
Thank you, Councillor Cutler. Any further debate? Then I'll just sum up. The most important thing for me in this budget is that we have to run an HRA budget that is fully balanced and is financially viable. That's the starting point, and for that I'd like to thank Mr. Johnson for all the work that he's done, and Mr. Hendy for all the work he's done, and all the other officers involved in putting this business plan and budget together for the HRA in most difficult times. I'd also like to thank the broader team of officers for the continual focus on delivering value for money to our tenants, residents and leaseholders. We have to prioritise where and how we spend our tenants' money. It's not our money, it's our tenants' money to deliver best value. And I believe we are striking a good balance between investing in new affordable homes, which is so vital for the whole of the country, not just this district, but equally investing in the quality of the existing homes and improving those so that those homes are more comfortable and can be run at lower cost. We also have investment in the plan to improve the way we work and deliver the service to our tenants and to our customers effectively. And there is investment in there in terms of looking at the contracts and the value that we're getting from our third-party suppliers and contractors, and equally looking at the IT infrastructure and the ability to make us easy to do business with. So I think the plan covers a variety of different areas, and that's been successfully done in the most difficult circumstances. I thank all involved for that. So at this point, I think I need to move to the recommendations, if I can find the paper. So the recommendations are long and extensive on here. Now I can read through all 18 recommendations, but I think if acceptable, I would like to ask if there are any recommendations that my cabinet colleague would like to focus upon, or whether we're happy to take all the recommendations and notes in a single move.
I'm happy to note them as they are. They're going to, this paper will go to the scrutiny committee this week and to cabinet this week. The recommendations.
Okay, so can I
airing then? So I think I'm happy to note them as they are.
Okay, so can I ask if we agree the recommendations as contained in CAB 3445?
Agreed.
Thank you. That's agreed. We need to get Councillor Becker back in. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, moving on to the next agenda item, which on the printed agenda is agenda item 9, which is the social housing regulation inspection regime. This is a short paper that has been brought to this committee for information for us to note. There's no decision associated with this paper. Mr. Tate, I believe you would like to speak on this paper. I will make a short introduction and then invite you up to speak if that's okay. Thank you. The previous HRA budget report not only recommended the rent and service charge increases for 2024-25, it set the HRA business plan going forwards. The housing service will need to develop an HRA service plan to drive service improvements and at the same time address new regulatory requirements. Therefore, this social housing regulation inspection report, although important in its own right, is important to help drive the housing landlord service forwards. In particular, it provides the context for the next item on the agenda, the resident engagement strategy, which aims to achieve the regulatory requirements to ensure the voice of the tenant is heard and acted upon and that the service is held to account. We're asked to note the report, but I think that we should consider if that is sufficient and whether, given the changes that the service has faced and the need to ensure we continuously review the changes we propose, we should propose whether we should request a report back later in the year with an assessment of the service at the moment, including any changes to those standards. So what I'm proposing, colleagues, is that in addition to noting the paper, we request a report back on this paper to this committee later in the year when the work has progressed further. So at that point, I will move over to Mrs. Knight to give more detail in a second. But Mr. Tate, would you like to speak?
Thank you, Chair, for the opportunity to address this committee. I read the paper quite a number of times. I was in two minds as to whether I would make any comments at all. But trying to get some sense of what does it actually mean and what teeth, if any, does it give to the local authority? And does it presuppose that the tenant will raise the issues, or will the tenant complain? I came to this committee some while ago and raised an issue of Black Swan Building, which is a council-owned building, supported housing, but not run by the council. And one of the residents took me round the building, which I know quite well, to another resident's flat where there were clear issues of damp and other issues. There were broken windows, and I was very grateful as a result of me raising it at this committee. Officers did contact the tenant, but the tenant hasn't responded. I don't think the tenant is going to respond. So the issues of damp still remain. The broken windows, which she broke herself, or one of people in the property broke, remain broken. So it's trying to stand back. I think, although I'm not a councillor, I do actually do quite a lot of housing work and engagement. And in some ways, it's much easier where the tenant is complaining, because you can focus on the issue. But it's when the tenant doesn't, and officers will know this, tenants who hoard don't recognise what they're doing. And it's a lifestyle habit or issue. So in practical terms, and I'm grateful for the comments you've said, Chair, about bringing another paper back, because I think that would be really helpful. So it's just some thoughts on that. So that concludes that. Chair, I didn't wish to speak on the New Homes programme, but I do feel duty bound just to mention Mr. Palmer, who retired last week, who started at this council in 1988, and he led that New Homes programme with quite fabulous energy and enthusiasm. So I was wondering whether there's an opportunity, at least perhaps, Chair, for you to minute some comment about Mr. Palmer, who is now retired. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Tate. Your comment and your request is duly noted, and I also give my thanks to Mr. and Mrs. Palmer, who were both involved deeply in the housing service for many years. Sadly, I only crossed paths with them for the last 6 to 8 months, but it's clear the work and the difference they have made over a substantial period to this council, and their leaving is a great loss to us, but I wish them every happiness and success and long life in retirement, and go and enjoy themselves. In terms of your comments on a specific case, it would be helpful, Mr. Tate, if we took that offline from this meeting, as it's a specific case, and I think Mrs. Thorburn and I can speak to you about that. In terms of this particular paper, the Social Housing Act will have a significant impact on every provider of social housing in the country, whether they're a private organisation or whether they're a local authority. And it's only right that we bring to the attention of everybody this act, which is the purpose of this paper, and point out that there is work that all organisations need to do to get to a point where they can fully meet the spirit and the letter of the Social Housing Act as it's written, and also prepare for the inevitable inspection that every organisation will have at some point in the future. So the purpose of this paper, I'll ask Mrs. Knight just to add a little more detail in a second to this, is to allow everybody to understand the work that is required to move this organisation and our housing service to the correct footing to meet all the needs of that act going forwards. The next paper we'll look at one aspect of that, which is the engagement with tenants. But this is the overriding proposal and paper. Thank you. So, Mrs. Knight, would you like to say a few more words, and then we'll take some questions?
Yes, just to endorse Councillor Westwood's comments there. It is a piece of legislation that, as a landlord, and we like to think we're a pretty well performing landlord, that we absolutely welcome, and we're glad that this legislation is here to make sure that the rest of the sector are also held to account. The report does just literally summarise the forthcoming changes for the regulatory regime. It is a fundamental part of the framework, and we will be, as Councillor Westwood has indicated, we will undergo an inspection ourselves, something similar to Ofsted over the next 4 years. And there is a level of teeth to it, because you can fail, you can pass or you can fail. So there is that teeth attached to it as well. We will have tenant satisfaction measure standards that we need to collect, and we need to process information specified for the regulator relating to their performance against 22 tenant satisfaction measures, including satisfaction that the home is well maintained and safe. The TSMs will also include a measure on where residents feel the council makes a positive contribution to their community and neighbourhood. And this is the first time this issue has been tested, but it will provide an opportunity
to see how our own services compare to other housing providers. So again, it's welcomed. You know, you can always learn from the sector. It does address the needs and expectations of residents. It provides them with the opportunity to make their voice heard, which underpins a reviewed regulatory regime. TACT have been regularly briefed on the emerging changes since the publication of the Social Housing White Paper in November 2020, which led to this legislation. We've taken it to Business Housing and Policy in February 23. And from then through to January, members of TACT have been involved in the consultation and also promoted our 2023 Tenant Satisfaction Survey, encouraging tenants to participate. So I'm greatly appreciative of the contribution TACT has made to the next paper, which this is currently underpinning and hopefully giving you some idea of what's coming forward. We are currently working towards being regulator ready by reviewing our current practices through an Ombudsman self-assessment tool against the new standards, and to identify hopefully good practice as well as gaps in service delivery and opportunities for improvement. June is a big date for us. We need to submit our self-assessment. We need to also submit our tenant satisfaction measures and our survey that we undertook. That will be from the survey we undertook in 2023. So we have a year of lots of work ahead of us, and the next paper, I hope, shows how we are going to go about tackling that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Knight. Can I move to questions? So are there any questions? Councillor Cutler.
Yes, my question is, do you have any indication of what the inspection regime is going to be like? It's been likened to Ofsted. If it's like Ofsted, it's a problem, isn't it? Because, you know, is it going to be a one-word assessment that will be a headline of, you know, sort of satisfactory or inadequate, or is there any indication of, you know, sort of what sort of process they're going to undertake on inspections?
Hasn't been made clear to us as yet, but we do have a code of practice that we're hoping to see come out this week. So hopefully that will guide us somewhat.
Thank you. Councillor Horrell.
Chair, I welcome your suggestion that we look at this paper later in the year once we get into the flow of it. I think that's really helpful to all of us, including the tenants. One element, and I heard this at a recent grouping that we led as a council with private landlords, is no matter how we try, and I know in the past, perhaps on on gas safety checks, sometimes people just don't want us to be in their home. And obviously we're going to be measured on some of these performances. But if we are not able to engage our tenants in supporting some of that activity, what do we have to demonstrate, or how can we work with our TAC colleagues to show that we've given it our best effort? Because some of this may not all be through lack of effort on our own part. It may be that others are not happy to engage with us who are in our properties. So just like to understand what that mechanism is going to look like and how we're going to have a good conversation about why this is important and why we all need to support that activity. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Horrell. Mrs. Knight, could you just respond there? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Horrell. I'm hoping we'll be able to cover that out off in the next paper, but basically you're right, the regulation is there to challenge us on those are we making sure that we are reaching those that are seldom heard? Are we making sure that everybody, we need to evidence that those with protected characteristics are involved in our discussions and the work that we carry out with our engagement? One example came from some training I was on recently from Housing Quality Network, who said, are you contacting all of your tenants that maybe haven't raised a repair within the last year to 18 months? Because that may mean they're not engaging with any other services as well. We're able to provide data for that, and that certainly will be one of our more engagement tactics this year. Sorry.
Thank you. Any further questions? Councillor Batho.
Thank you. And clearly that the tenant satisfaction measures that are being required of us by this Act are covered in majority by the work that we're already undertaking. I'm just wondering, in terms of the actual measures that they're requiring of us, are there any further levels of granularity that they will be expecting us to prepare, or is it just these high-level sort of items that are actually in the chart that you've got in the paper?
There is a regime that is set within the paper that the regulator and ombudsman are expecting us to follow, but obviously this is something for us to obviously comply with, but our driver all the way through our work is to provide good customer service and to make sure that we're reaching all of our tenants. We want our engagement to be meaningful, relevant, appropriate, timely, which hopefully we're explaining in the next paper. But yes, it's certainly a hook for us to hang our work on and to make sure that we comply. We want to be up there with the well-performing landlords. I know that will be important to Cabinet and Councillor Westwood, but you know, we'll be doing it for the right reasons and not just the new regulatory regime.
Thank you. Any further questions? Then I'll move to debate. Any debate on this paper? See no debate. Sorry, Councillor Cutler.
Yeah, just that final comment, I think, from Mrs. Knight was I think really important, which is that we want to do the job rather than comply with the regulations. But you know, in doing the job, we need to comply with the regulations. So it's getting that balance right, never getting into we're doing this to keep the regulator happy. We're doing this to keep good relationship with our tenants and provide a good service. And I think that's the really important part to draw out of this.
Thank you. Any further debate? Okay, I see nothing. So just to sum up here, you know, I'm very pleased that this the short paper has been brought before us, and the changes that we need to make in terms of a business, a housing business, are fairly significant. And this paper just sets the stall out that there is a period of change coming up, and the outcome will be better for the tenants, it'll be better for the council, better for everybody going forwards, and I welcome that. I say again that I'd like to change the recommendation on this paper. So for my colleagues either side of me, the revised recommendation is that this report is noted by the committee. In addition, the committee requests a report back later in the year with an assessment of the service, including changes we propose to meet the regulatory standards. So with that as the recommendation, is that noted and agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you. And can I just thank Mrs. Knight and all the other people involved in the officer team for their work on this over not just the short paper, but many other activities they've done, and also Mrs. Palmer, just to pick up on Mr. Tate's point, who's worked significantly in this area. Is obviously not with us today here, and this is work that's been going back probably 2 years to bring us to this point, and the next paper will show some of the level of detail that's been done on one specific area. So thank you. Right, so moving on to our final paper of the day. So this is item 10 on the agenda, and this is the Housing Engagement and Communication Plan. So in the pack, this is quite an extensive range of documents, and I'll introduce the paper to try and tell a story behind this, so we can try and string all the different documents together. And Mr. Tate, I'll ask you up to speak once I've finished, if that's okay. Right, so the previous items set out the changes to the regulatory regime of the regulatory social housing following the introduction of the Social Housing Regulation Act 2023. Ensuring residents' voices are heard and acted upon is a central theme of that Act. This paper, the Housing Engagement and Communication Plan, aims to achieve the regulatory requirement to ensure the voice of the tenant is heard and acted upon, and that the service is held to account. Tenants' engagement is fundamental to a council's housing strategy, and we have a really strong track record of tenant engagement at Winchester City Council, and this is something that we are rightfully proud of. We very much value the involvement of our tenants in helping us develop and shape our plans in terms of our delivery of all our housing services, whether that's our new build programme or our services in relation to our current housing stock. We not only have TACT, tenants and council together, but we also have a range of other engagement methods and activities to engage with tenants. We know that our tenants value their involvement, and we are very grateful as a council to all our tenants who engage or are part of our engagement activity, whether that's online in response to a survey or more directly through focus groups, special interest groups, and particularly TACT. A special thanks go to the TACT Chair, Vice Chair and Communication Leads, two of which are with us today, so Mr Chafe and Mr Perkins, but I will also mention Mrs Gill as the Vice Chair of TACT, who can't be with us here today. I'd like to thank them for all the time and commitment they've given to TACT and their involvement with the City Council. As I said, we do have a strong record in this area, but society has evolved over the years and our engagement approach must evolve to meet the changing expectations. As this paper makes clear, the paper before us today has very much been created in collaboration and in consultation with our tenants throughout a range of activities. During the period February 2021 to January 2023, through workshops and briefings with TACT, tenant involvement groups and focus groups, plus the use of digital and paper surveys. The results of this consultation up to January 2023 were used to inform the draft Housing Engagement and Communication paper taken to the Business Housing Policy Committee in February 2023. Comments and recommendations from that meeting have been taken forward into this plan that is before us today. Further consultation and review was undertaken during the period March through to December 2023, again with TACT and tenant groups, and again through both paper and digital surveys. An independent review of the engagement was undertaken with Housing Quality Network and best practice advice sought from HQN, who have experience through working with numerous housing providers and local authorities. The findings are very clear that we need to engage with younger households more widely across the different types of tenants and residents if we're to shape the service to deliver what is important to all tenants. Feedback, including retaining the tenants and council together identity, was important. So with the idea of an overarching board under the tenants and council together banner. Form of structure proposed is included in diagrammatic form in Appendix 5 in the papers and includes three main components. The first component is the TACT board. The TACT board will hold the council to account for delivery of the housing service. The board will comprise of tenants, independent members and council members. The portfolio holder and the main opposition shadow portfolio holder will be members of that committee. Consumer standard groups is the second component. These have an operational focus on housing delivery. The groups will align to the regulator of social houses proposed standards groups, and members of these groups will be our tenants and residents. And the membership of that group is not limited in any way. I'd be delighted if we had huge numbers involved in each of those groups to give us the representation and feedback that we require. And one of the many comments I've had back over the process is, how do we get to talk to the council? This is how you get to talk to the council, and this will open up, hopefully, engagement with the council to a far broader number of people. It's a key central plank to the plan going forwards. The third area in the diagram is informal activities. This will be the engine room for tenant engagement. reaching out to our tenants and residents using the approach and techniques outlined in Appendix 1 of the report. And that is the appendix that was taken through Business and Housing Policy Committee in February 2023. There are two other elements of the formal structure: the council and the review process. It is imperative that the council officers engage with TACT, the TACT board, the consumer standards groups, and the informal activities to proactively drive this model. The resources and financial implications of this are incorporated into the HRA business plan that we discussed earlier in the meeting. And secondly, the review process. The review process is there to ensure the model is working correctly and that we are engaging effectively across our tenant and resident base, and we are hearing the voice of the resident and we are acting upon the voice of the resident. The new structure has been developed in partnership with the TACT committee, the TACT support group, service delivery groups, other tenants through survey opportunities, members, officers, and an independent review from HQN. We are being asked to approve the housing engagement communication plan today, and I hope we can agree that. Once the structure is approved, further work on the proposed structure will be co-produced with the residents to complete the final level of detail. So in a moment, I'll ask Mrs. Knight if there's anything she would like to add to that. But before that, Mr. Tate, I think you would like to speak on this paper. Thank you.
Thanks again, Chair. I've read this report with considerable interest, and I was just thinking back when I was writing some notes. I've sort of had some involvement with housing for almost 25 years, and I'm still a director of the Winchester Housing Trust, and I was a trustee of St John's and St Cross, who both provide housing. And in all the time I've been on the council, there's been an ongoing debate about how to engage with tenants. I hadn't realised that TACT was only formed in 1995. I got a sense that it had been going a lot longer than that. But I thought it was worth just mentioning from my own experience. I was part of the last housing options process, which I think worked well, but I think the strength of that process was that it used an independent body to support the tenants' views. I'm not advocating that we go to Peter Marsh, who was the TPAS consultant there. Peter's a local resident and he does work within that field. But and it's no criticism of TACT, but I think TACT recognise themselves, and they always have done in my conversations with them, that they represent a segment of our tenants, but it perhaps doesn't reflect the broader tenant body. I was looking at the TACT board, and it doesn't go into detail. I don't think the paper does, but when it says 2 independents, I'm assuming that's just 2 independent councillors. And I feel strongly from my experience, partly through the Winchester Housing Trust, where we're a small housing provider, but we have similar issues about engagement with tenants, that there are some specialists out there, and whether better consideration should be given. And one of the experiences I've evidenced is that tenants can be quite reluctant to criticise their housing provider because they get it in their mind that if they criticise their housing provider, they are jeopardising their right to housing. And it's something which is embedded. It has no factual truth to it, but it may stop the good communication between the tenants. And as Chair, as you said in your opening statements to this committee, it's the tenants' money. It's not councillors' money. It's not general fund money. And when we had that housing option survey, although tenants chose to stay with the council, the arm's length management organisation option was one that they gave careful consideration to. So perhaps more work to be done here. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for your comments, Mr. Tate. And just to answer the direct point that you made there about the independence on the TAC board. The TAC board, those independents will be not councillors. They will be independent people with housing experience that we can bring into the TAC board. Will bring third-party view and experience from elsewhere. So there is in Appendix 6, I think it is the role definition for the members of the board within the pack. So that board will be in place to hold the council to account, and it will be made up of residents and independent people, not independent councillors. And it will also have on that board representation from the councillors in terms of myself as the portfolio holder and the main opposition party's nomination, which would usually be, I would imagine, the shadow housing person, in which case this would be Councillor Harrell. And that is the group that will hold the council to account in terms of the service delivery, in terms of the TSMs that are measured. You know, and if our property services delivery was not meeting requirements, then it's at that point they will face off to the council and engage to discuss how we actually do meet the specific requirements that we have and key measures that we're trying to be measured to. The level down, which I've talked about in terms of the consumer standard groups, which will be renamed, by the way, that's the regulator's name. So part of the engagement following, hopefully, agreement to the model today is that we work with the residents and with the tenants to turn these into meaningful names and something that means something to people that would attract them to be part of those groups. That is where the real work will be done, and there should be no stigma attached to coming along and pointing out where we're failing, and we need that input at that point. And people from representatives from those four regulatory consumer group areas, broad areas of council service, will representative each of those will be sitting on the TACT board. So hopefully in answer to your question, it is independent and not independent councillors, and and we would welcome challenge at all levels. So thank you for that. Mrs. Knight, is there anything you wanted to add to what I've said?
Really, no, you did a super job at that, so I don't think I can add anything of value.
Right, thank you. Therefore, I'll move to questions. So do I have any questions on the paper, Councillor Rutter?
Chair. I think the development of the TAC board is a very positive step forward. Is it the case that this is a new approach? So presumably it will the makeup of the board and how it operates and all aspects, in fact, of effective tenant engagement will evolve in time as we get into actually running the new board and it gets involved in assessing effectiveness of engagement and so on. So I'm assuming that this is like all council organisations, it's not set in concrete. This is a proposal. This is the first stab at it, and once it's up and running, then if it wants to make recommendations to evolve itself, it can do that and so on.
You're absolutely correct in that it will evolve going forwards. We need to put a stake in the ground as to where we would like to start, and the attempt there is in terms of all aspects of this document and paper in front of you, and indeed on Appendix 6, the roles, responsibilities and profiles of the people on the TACT board and how it will operate. That review process that I pointed out in the model on Appendix 5 is equally applicable to the TACT board as it is to the consumer groups and to the informal activities that we undertake to engage as broadly as we possibly can across our entire tenant and resident base. So answer is yes, it will evolve. Thank you. Councillor Horace.
Chair, thank you for the opportunity to discuss this paper with you before today, and you know that I have some concerns about what we're proposing, but I understand we do need to meet the requirements going forward, and we have to be operational from April. So we haven't, unfortunately, got a test and learn opportunity. We've got to sort of step right into it, as Councillor Rutter said, and sort of learn as we go. So one question I have for you, Chair, which I think you've committed to on a couple of occasions this morning, is whether we could put in a formal review process for this committee at some point after a reasonable period to look at how things are working, how effective we're being, what we can learn where we've been really successful, and how we can translate that. That would be a formal request to you as to whether we could build that in to our approach. The other question I would ask as well, just to add clarity, on page 34, the terms of reference for the consumer service groups will be co-produced with the groups themselves. Can you help us to understand what that really means? What's going to happen? Will we have 4 different ones, 4 that sort of evolve in a similar way? How will we do that? And how will we all, as on this committee, be able to look at that as that evolves and ensure that we have the breadth that I think Mrs. Knight reminded us of earlier in terms of the breadth of tenants that need to be involved. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I'll have a stab at answering both of those to start with, and I'll refer to Mrs. Knight if there's more that needs to be added. So in terms of the review of how the board is performing, think back to the previous paper, which is that this is just one element of multiple activities that we need to do to meet the regulatory requirements. And I would hope that a review of all of those different areas would be brought forward in terms of the approach that we take to meeting holistically the letter and the spirit of the regulations. So the tenant engagement part was absolutely vital, really, really important, is one of many. So I would like to see that review at that level across all the areas that we need to perform with. And the second point is that there is a review structure and mechanism built in into the model, which I've talked about now several times. And also there will be an annual report that will be delivered by the TAC board that will come to this committee, and we will have the opportunity to discuss and to review the success of that board at this committee on an annual basis. Equally, they will have the opportunity to challenge us as a board that are responsible for delivery of the service. So it's a two-way thing. So I think there's multiple places that actually happen. And your second point reminded me, sorry.
Sorry, Chair. Can you help us to understand how we'll go about page 34, the co-production of the terms of reference for the groups, and who will drive that from across the 4 to have, you know, are they all different? Are they the same? How are we going to go about that? Thank you, Chair.
We need some level of collaboration and consistency across the consumer groups. The idea behind this is that rather than us tell the tenants or residents who are volunteering to come into these groups exactly how this is going to work, we would like to talk to them about how they would like it to work. And it's even down to the names. We don't want to call this consumer regulatory groups, playing with the technology in front of me, sorry. So it's even down to the names of the groups and to what they're called, because we need to make these attractive, and also there needs to be different ways to engage. So there'll be some people who want to work and are willing to work on a fairly regular basis. There's other people that would dip in and out. There's other people that would only want to contribute outside working hours because they're working the limited time, so perhaps a digital way, or Teams type meetings as opposed to physical face-to-face meetings. So when we say co-author at that level, we mean discussing with the residents the best way to run those groups in terms of delivering the outcomes that we want from those groups, which is to effectively measure, manage, and help us drive a housing service that delivers what our residents and our tenants want. And in terms of getting consistency across the groups, the officer involvement, I go back to that, is absolutely paramount in this. The officers need to drive this model forwards. Without the officer engagement and the officer commitment and the resources that we put into the HRA plan and the skills and the training with the officers in being able to do this model will not work. It will slowly wither and die. So the officers' engagement is fundamental to it, and we will have a view over all of the regulatory groups, and whatever we may call them, whatever the residents want to call them. And one part of what we would like to achieve is we don't want 4 different ways of doing a job. We want some consistency, but accept that within each group there will be preferred methods of working depending on the people we have in there and the areas that we're talking about. So if it's around we talked earlier about landscape, community, and so on. Maybe there's more outdoor physical approach to this, and maybe we have tenant monitors in place for that sort of thing. But other areas which are not so physical, which might be talking about rents, for example, then would work in a different way. So that's what we mean by it, is to not be prescriptive at this point as to exactly how that will work, but we clearly do need a level of consistency, and those groups will need to feed back up into the TACT board as well, with their representatives on the TACT board, to bring it all back together again to hold the council to account. A long answer, but I think you might get the sentiment of where I'm coming from there. Mrs. Knight, is there anything that you want to add to that?
Thank you. Perhaps just some reassurance that although our current draft engagement plan may feel different for Winchester, it really isn't. It's something that's been established a long time in the sector in other areas. HQN endorsed it because they see lots of different models of it, and hopefully we've taken the best advice from them, from the good models, but just to provide some reassurance. And the whole driver of the legislation is that the tenants are at the heart of how we provide services and make our decisions, and that's why it must be done together with our tenants once we've got on that road, that journey road.
Any other questions? Councillor Bafford.
Thank you, and I really welcome the opportunity for us to broaden our sort of engagement with tenants. One of the categories in Appendix 7 that seems to be an area where we aren't getting very great engagement is the 16 to 34 age groups. The report suggests that that's around about 11% overall. Meetings and focus groups are low, which you might expect for that group, but even digital surveys was only at 7%. I'm just wondering if you've had any work in terms of understanding why that engagement with that particular age group is so low, and what you might then anticipate in terms of this plan as to how we might sort of improve and raise that to a more sort of acceptable level. Thank you.
It's sort of similar to what I mentioned earlier. We really need to make sure that our engagement is personalised, it is relevant, and it does reach. And I'm going to be honest and say, and I'm sure my TACT colleagues were. I can't remember quite what it's like to be 16 and what your priorities are. But I do know that it's very, it's through WhatsApp and it's through Facebook, and they don't want to come to a formal meeting, and many of that younger age don't want to complete digital surveys, which for some years we thought was really dynamic of us to be doing. So we have really got to learn from those tenants, but the message is very clear that we do need to know who's behind each of our doors. We need to find that out. We need to understand why they are or aren't engaging. We can't service plan if we don't know what is really at the heart of what our tenants want. So for us, we have to find those different models. We have to go to them, integrate in groups. It may well be that it's a WhatsApp type group that we get going, but we do need to find those different methods. Obviously, that's always challenging because it can also be an opportunity to be a bit of a Winchester rant. So we will need to manage that. We'll need to have incentives, but it's very much we want to learn from them, and we'll need to go to them to find that information. And it won't be me going in a suit. It will be a younger member of the team.
Rebecca.
Swapping microphones. A little less noisy. I'm pleased you brought up the engagement strategy because I do have some questions on that. It does feel to me to be a little heavy on the traditional modes of engagement, and you've just been speaking about the opportunities for Facebook, for WhatsApp, but when I see the what are termed the informal methods in the paper, they are referred to as low priorities and low commitment. So I just wanted to expand on why those are low, and can we move them up in the scale, given the importance of hearing from the wide range of ages of tenants and different types of tenants that we have. And then I've got a follow up as well.
Thank you, Councillor Becker. That's really helpful feedback. I hadn't got that feel through the engagement plan because I thought there were lots of different ways to engage, but I think you're right. I think that's important, and hopefully some of the methods that we're talking around now will be helpful. We do have, we've recently had a reorganisation of responsibilities, and we are now putting more resources into our tenant engagement team, and as I've said, they themselves will be a cross section of officers, and they have some really exciting ideas on how to engage with our younger registers, tenants, or those that we seldom hear from, and also making sure that we include everybody who's within our protected characteristics. We need to improve our data, we really do. That is a big need for us, and we have invested in the HRA budget this year to make sure that we get on top of that IT. We do need to, although we need to know who everybody is, we also need to know that data, and sometimes I'm quite envious of housing associations who have that team behind them that can get that characteristic to know that, because it's very different. You could have an 80-year-old that really needs to engage with us, you could have an 80-year-old that really doesn't need any help at all, and we need to get down to that rather than the making assumptions around certain age groups. And as it said, we carried out that listening survey, and our 35s to 40s were very similar in their approach as the younger people. So we are, I take what you've said, and I'll certainly revisit. It is a draft engagement plan. We have to have something really on the table as well. We did a lot of work with it. I think it was quite relevant when we started it off. TACT were involved with us a few years when we started that off. But I think once we can get the advisory board up, that will probably be the first piece of work that we review.
Thanks. On that, you mentioned that it was a draft engagement plan. I don't think that comes through in here. We are asked to adopt this as the engagement plan until 2026. So can I ask that we adopt it as a draft, or as a plan that will be worked on and reviewed, and as a living document rather than as a fixed in stone, this is how we engage for the next two years.
Apologies, I was trying to say it's a live document that will involve. Apologies, I used.
No, that's all right. As one of the key, the main thing that underpins my role is the council listening better. And so one other question I had was on page 40, page 4 of the listing of the plan. We don't mention that one of the responsibilities of the council is to listen. So I, as one of the first revisions, could we please add that in? It is there on the communication principles on the left-hand side, but I think it's really key that we have one of the responsibilities of the council is to listen to the feedback that we're receiving.
Thank you. Are there any final questions before we move to debate? Councillor Horrell.
Chair, just one point of clarification. We have the measures that are in the legislation. The communication plan doesn't have any specific measurable outcomes. We have the measures that we have to record satisfaction and management element. Are we thinking that we will evolve beyond that in terms of other measures that will match against this document if this is a draft that evolves? So that we can look back on that. How do we put the quantifiable outcomes against this plan? Thank you.
The measure of success of this programme will be the engagement. We need to go and talk to the silent majority and get their views in and understand their views. And in that respect, success will be volume in terms of people engaged with those consumer groups, whatever we call them, going forwards. And I agree with you that there needs to be some form of measure in terms of what success looks like, what the profile looks like of the age groups in there, what the different areas of our district are that are in there, and whether they are general housing or any other aspect that we have housing that we provide, whether they're leaseholders, whether they're tenants. So there's so many ways you can cut this that there has to be some measure of success. So Mrs. Knight, is that something that we can incorporate into this going forward? So Mr. Hendy.
Thank you, Chair. The regulatory standards are all outcome measures. Clearly, what we're talking about here is a way in which we can work with our customers to achieve those outcome measures. If we're really effective in terms of engaging with our customers, then customer satisfaction should increase. As night follows day, that should be the case. So although we could come up with some indicators for the way this plan might work, I would suggest the ultimate sort of arbiter about whether it's been effective, about whether we can drive up our customer satisfaction measures and some of the other outcome measures that the regulators requiring of us.
Am I allowed to ask a supplementary? Because Chair, that's slightly different from how you were looking to make sure we've had a what's our profile, the types of accommodation, geography. That isn't quite the same as Mr. Hendy's articulated, because satisfaction overall, when you have an average, could be fine, but it could all be coming from the rural district or the younger one or whatever. So just to make sure that all those other elements that Mrs. Knight has mentioned, you've mentioned in the regulations, we're not at that level of finesse, but what do we aspire to, given that we're not just doing this for the regulator, we're doing it to be good landlords and provide the very best communities for our tenants. So your answer was much more specific than perhaps Mr. Hendy. So just to seek clarification, so we're all on the same page. Thank you.
Okay, and if I have a first stab at that, Mr. Hendy, if I may, we do already measure what I said about in terms of and in terms of what Mr. Hendy said in terms of the tenant satisfaction. We do already measure where the responses come from. I mean, it's anonymised, but we do know whether it's come from the loosely termed North Rural, South Rural, City, pick the area. And we do already have that. We do already have the age groups across it. So at the tenant satisfaction, I think, survey level, we do measure and have that data. I think what I was saying was within the engagement, the communication plan, the engagement model, where we're getting people actively involved, I thought that there should be some success criteria, shall we say, put onto those groups, and that's where I was coming from, Mr. Hendy.
Thank you, Chair. If I may, just so I'm not misunderstood. For example, the tenant satisfaction survey showed that those under the age of 35 were more dissatisfied with the quality of services we provided those on other demographic groups, and therefore, if we want to drive up overall satisfaction, we should be targeting people from that particular demographic, understanding the issues they've got, and making sure we can respond to that so that we can drive up our overall customer satisfaction. So I'm not saying we don't have specific targets. Clearly we do. We need to drill down to the details of our customers to understand the specific issues so we can improve the service overall.
If I can just add to that, I think the place we could do that is in the review area within the model itself. Right, we've got that review layer in there that we can use as we see fit to make sure that we're actually delivering a successful outcome here. And the types of questions you've asked there can be incorporated into that review layer as we build that out in discussion with tenants going forwards.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Perkins, did you want to speak?
Thank you for that. An earlier comment suggested that the younger people possibly don't complain because they're concerned about their tenancy rights. I don't actually accept that any longer. I think that the public are well aware what their tenancy rights are with regard to local housing. They don't participate, I don't think, because they think it won't make any difference. Our challenge to be able to recruit more people who are interested in this is to show them that they can make a difference. And to that end, I wonder whether there are some suggestions that TACT has to reform the residents' associations, for instance, who are very much local community bodies who can then promote what TACT represents. I think the biggest difficulty you're going to have with setting this up, and I do recognise this is a work in progress with a lot of work for everybody else to do, it's to encourage them, perhaps by having a welcome pack, setting the local associations up, and promoting TACT from day one of their tenancy. If those new tenants feel that things can be different, that their voices can be heard, I think they will engage. I think it's because there is a feeling that it's almost a hopelessness that nobody's going to listen. I'd also like to see, if it's possible, to utilise the tenant support funds in a greater way to a wider audience, to younger tenants and their families. I also wonder if on the tenant satisfaction surveys, again, where people respond and never hear anything else, if there was some sort of facility to be able to respond back to them with the comments that they've made, obviously in a positive light. Thank you.
Thank you. And can I thank you for those really wise words? I mean, Jules, that is the sort of input that we want when we're setting this up to make this work. That's the positive contributions that we're looking for. As I've spoken to you before, I think you should be ensuring that you're actively involved in this going forward. So thank you for that input. And you know, some of my colleagues taking notes there, so that clearly is resonating with a number of people here. But that for me is the co-production of this, and that's the vital and important information that we need to make this work together going forwards. Thank you. Councillor Batto.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, it was just to say that was the conversation we had prior to that input was the reason I asked the question about granularity of the tenant satisfaction measures, Because if we just use the model that's being obviously presented as part of the Act, as was being said, the results of that are far too high level to actually, sort of identify where potential issues are. And therefore, my question was whether the Act requires us to do any further level of granularity, or whether we will continue to do that because that's what we've already been doing as part of our tenant satisfaction surveys anyway. Because if we were just to use the level that the government, if it is only at that level, requires, actually we're not doing our tenants the service that they need, because it doesn't actually give us the information some of which we are using in the meeting today to discuss in terms of actually how we're going to engage with those tenants. So that was the reason for that question, was just to clarify what the Act requires, and therefore the additional work that we're already doing will continue, because that is the work that actually identifies the real root causes of some of these issues. Thank you.
We seem to have drifted into debate, so I'll just formally declare debate now, if we can, and move on from questions. So is there any further debate on this paper? Councillor Laurel.
Chair, thank you. And thank you for the opportunity to input to this evolving piece of work, which I think we've all got to put our backs into, given we're going to have the regulator on our door at some point. I welcome the fact that this is a working model, a draft that we will evolve, that we will be looking for inputs, and that we can build on that wonderful relationship we've had with TACT as an organisation, the housing team historically, build on all of that we have and move forward in the new way that we're being asked to engage in. And also to remember that, yes, we've got the Act to satisfy. We have been a very responsible provider of homes to date, but actually that we still have aspirations over and above all of that, as a very reputable and I think much loved provider of homes in the district. And I hope that we can build on the basics of what we're being asked to do from a regulation point of view to make this even bigger and better for our tenants. Thank you.
Any further debate? Councillor Batty.
Don't want to delay the meeting any further, but I just want to acknowledge that this is a fantastic opportunity to improve the communication with our tenants, not only in terms of obviously getting information from them through listening better, but also in actually turning that round and representing what the council's actually doing by actually demonstrating to our tenants how those requests or those sort of calls for action are then actually being implemented and sort of demonstrated in terms of what we do. So I see it's not just as sort of listening to our tenants, but actually the council turning that round and actually being able to present a viable and sort of credible plan as to how we're responding to those issues that are being identified. So I really do appreciate this opportunity and look forward to that plan then being developed in the fullness of time. So thank you very much.
Any further debate? So I will sum up. This has been a fascinating discussion, and I think we've all learned even more. And I think this is today the beginning of the new process. I'm grateful for two of our colleagues at the back there for turning up. And next time we have these conversations at this committee about what is at the heart of everything we do, which is homes for people, that we get more people occupying all those chairs who we are providing homes for, and that we get that much better engagement back the other way. And that people, and I take your point, Mr. Perkins, about people shouldn't be afraid of confronting us. We're not going to kick people out. We are an organisation that tries to keep people in their homes. We're not an organisation that is, trying to move people on and put the rent up. This is not a private housing organisation. We have people in their homes and we try to keep them in their homes. The work that Mrs. Thorburn does and teams under Mrs. Knight in terms of tenancy sustainability and ensuring that people that struggle with paying their rent are not turfed out is to absolutely be applauded, and that is the ethos of this council. I think that goes back to Councillor Horrell, what you're saying, that this is a good organisation. We should all be very proud of it. I just see this as the next phase growing from here, and it's clear from the number of empty chairs that we need to engage more broadly, and let's get a crowd of people in here next time. Let's get representation across. Let's get your feedback. Let's do an even better job together going forwards, and that's where I think we're going with this paper. I do think it will evolve from here, which is why we deliberately said this will be co-authored going forward, why there is a review process within the model, why there's an overarching paper that came before this that talks about all aspects of the Regulation Act. I mean, this paper doesn't talk about the data issues that you talked about tonight. So there's another piece of work there. So we've got a very clear idea who all our tenants are and which one I only brought up today actually before the meeting, which of our properties have got adaptations for disability access and things like that, so that we very clear what we've got in our stock and where we can get best use out of our stock and give the best help to the people that need it at the times they need it, and so on. There's so much more we can do, and I think this is a start, and I think this I thank all the officers for the work that's been done long before my time over the last 2 years now to get us to this point. I particularly thank the members of TACT committee and the TACT group, the two of which are sitting in the audience here, for your support and help to get us here. And I know your concern is that this is the end and you're going to be thrown away. No, it's not. This is it's the first part of the next chapter, and we absolutely need your help to move it forwards and to reach we talk about it, your children and your grandchildren who are in our council homes as well, and so that's why all of you are so important. Mr. Perkins, your insight there that we've already talked about. I spoke to you last week about this, that we really need that insight at the top of what we're doing as well. So thank you all. So at this point, I think I'll move to the recommendations. So the recommendations are that the Cabinet Committee Housing agree. Number one, to establish the TACT board. Number two, the terms of reference for the TACT board as at Appendix 6. Number three, that non-councillor TACT board members will receive compensation for attendance at the TACT board. And number four, to approve the housing engagement communication plan. Is that agreed?
Drafting.
Okay, so number four, to approve the draft housing engagement and communication plan. That is agreed. Okay. Thank you. Right, I have one final item, which is the dates of the next meetings. The dates of the next meetings are into the new fiscal year and new council year. So the next meeting is on the 8th of July. We'll have the new homes and retrofit updates and standing item. I don't have a record of any other business at that particular meeting. On the 5th of November, again, the new homes retrofits update with the accommodation, the strategy for homeless households, which Mr. Thorburn is driving forwards. And 3rd of February 2025, again with the updates on new homes and retrofits, but also with the HRA budget for 25-26. Clearly, there'll be other additional activities and papers will be slotted into those meetings as we move forwards into the next council year. So thank you all very much again, and I close the meeting.